Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pride and Puck podcast. This is episode number 3, and as usual, we have a big guest on today. I'm really excited to have this person on. It's someone that I've met through hockey and someone that I now call a friend myself. Brendan Parsons, welcome to Pride and Puck podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be on.
How was your night finished up last night? Because we were both at the Melbourne Derby in the AIHL. How was your night?
Yeah, no, it finished good. Exciting to have the first derby of the season. Always good, but bit of a landslide. And personally, I don't care which way the results go as long as it's a good game, and it wasn't quite a good game. So made up for it at the pub after.
Yeah, as I was saying to you before, you look a lot fresher than me this morning. So who is Brendan Parsons?
Just a simple question. Well, at the moment, I am Vice President of Australian LGBTQ inclusive. What is our official name? We just call it the Aussie League, Australian LGBTQ Ice Hockey, and Vice President of the Southern Lights in Melbourne, which is a member of the aforementioned group. And I was one of the founders of both, there from the very beginning. And actually, funny you mentioned the AIHL. It was actually at one of those games that a few of us went, hey, we could actually maybe make a team of LGBTQ people. Like, oh, you know who else would? This person. So it actually started literally on a Pride night where we realized that there were a lot of people in the community, in the cross section of both communities, and went, we might have a whole team. And now we have 7 whole teams and plenty more. So yeah, it's quite timely to time it with right after a derby.
It's something that I've noticed, especially amongst Mustangs fans, that there is a lot of queer Mustang supporters. It's really strange.
We definitely noticed it, like from the very beginning. Even before Southern Lights started, we're like, wow, this is a queer support base, and we don't know why. It's something about the underdog, the newcomer, or possibly it was just social, that like 2 or 3 people happened to be queer and they just had the right social networks that convinced people. But I wish we had that sort of marketing genius, that we knew what would, get into these communities and pull people out. And also just a lot of allies. It's very open. Even on like last night's game, half of the Mustangs jerseys were like Pride jerseys, even though it wasn't a Pride night. So there's a lot of support there just naturally.
And for yourself, sport growing up, what was it like for you?
Well, it did exist. Sport existed when I was growing up. I had absolutely no interaction with it. We went to a co-ed school, so we didn't do Saturday sport or anything like that, but we had Wednesday afternoons and you had to pick a team. Of course, it was always gender divided in ways that now seem ridiculously sexist, that, women had volleyball, table tennis, soccer and hockey, while men had AFL, like these crazy things. But you had to choose one, and then you got picked for a team to go, play against another school. And there was a small group of us who always never got picked for a team, mostly by choice, because we were like, we're not here to play. We don't enjoy it. We don't want to go across Melbourne to play a sport. We don't care. So we just did random things. Someone had to take care of us, and we played t-ball and stuff like that. So that was like, I actually quite enjoyed that, but we virtually avoided it, even though I always went to the gym since I was 16, just loved the gym, but never anything team related until I was 26, maybe 25, when I randomly said, I want to try a sport. And I really liked the look of hockey. It was literally that simple. It was hockey or rugby.
And so you've picked probably the most roughest sport in the world.
People say that. And like, it's not really, I think even if you watch it, like when you watch it, you see that they're not collisions. They're sort of, you just slide into each other. And then I'm always telling people who say, oh, that's rough. It's like, well, you're really padded. You know, AFL, you're going to destroy your body pretty quickly. In hockey, you're just going to injure yourself. It's very rare to get hurt in those sorts of ways. So it's good for your tough guy image, really.
And how did you find hockey? Because it's not really, especially here in Australia, it's not the sport that comes to people's minds the first thing. It's usually Aussie rules, cricket, stuff like that.
Yeah, and like despite the accent that I've got, my parents are American, but I was born here and have always lived here. And they like hockey didn't exist for them. Like they would occasionally, now they're quite into watching AFL and American football. But when I was growing up, they like never mentioned it. So there was no real cultural push other than Mighty Ducks was around when I was the age, but I'd just sort of been exposed to it in the smallest ways. And it was literally just like watching a few plays and be like, I like the way that looks. And then when the Ice House opened in Docklands, I looked maybe once a year, sort of Googled and be like, God, I'd love to learn to do hockey. And just Googled and couldn't find anything. And then when Ice House opened, it was like, click here and sign up for class. It's like, okay, that's a way. And it's people who are starting hockey now, their mind might be blown, but I went to sign up and they were like, okay, well, we've had one this year. The next one will be in 6 months' time. Go on the waiting list. So I like waited 6 months and then they emailed and said, okay, got a space. And it was, I think, probably the second class they'd ever run there. Now there's, hundreds of thousands of alum and, classes all over, but it really was just kind of just discovering it in that way.
Do you remember the first time you put on a pair of skates to play or train hockey? And do you remember how you felt stepping into that sporting sort of landscape?
Yeah, I think it helped a lot that it wasn't, one of the reasons that I sort of narrowed down my choice to hockey or rugby is that these were sports that you could pick up as an adult. Absolutely not. While you could learn any sport, I couldn't play AFL. Where would I play? Where would there be adult beginners? That's extremely difficult. Whereas their hockey in Melbourne is got a strong adult beginner. In fact, it's the heavy majority. So I knew that it was going to be a lot of people in my position. That was obvious. So I was actually like, they're like, great, we'll chat to people and make friends. I'm a lot more outgoing now, but at the time I sort of had to like tell myself, like, just relax, talk to people, like, don't just be here by yourself. And you still get the smell of the rink, the feel of the cold getting there, the bit of the excitement. And it just helped having all the coaches and stuff, they were doing all the friendly, like, welcome, saying hello to everyone, helping, which is the stuff that now we replicate when we do a come and try. Like you speak to each person and you help them one-on-one. And so that's something that we follow through and know that it's really valuable. That can be the make or break. Someone might just say, yeah, not for me, my feet hurt. Or they say, no, that was really great.
Were there people when you were doing that are now a part of Southern Lights that were doing it at the same time as you?
Yes, there's very much eras through, it's now probably smoothed out, but there were very clear eras year by year of like the group who started and got to a point where they could play competitive hockey and then got taken in. And so Marie, who's one of the founders, she, I think, only started a year after me. People I play with, like, we know that we were in the same class, but this was 12 years ago now, and we were all there. I don't think we ever spoke, or maybe we did and forgot. So it's, the hockey community in Victoria is small, even though it's like a couple thousand people. Everyone's met everyone at least once.
And when you were part of that the founding group for Southern Lights and LGBTQ ice hockey, was there any sort of vision that you had in your mind about where this could go or where you wanted to take it? Or was it just, okay, let's get together and just see what happens?
Yeah, it was an intentional choice as well to do. We knew that we didn't know what would happen, but we also didn't have particularly grand plans. We had seen other sports have done, you know, queer teams and sort of the advocacy side. And we were like, oh, literally, I think we've got enough for a team of queer people. And we kind of thought like we should do an exhibition game, like we should rent the rink and just have fun. And we're like, oh, okay, well, wait, maybe we could do more, because it was about the same time that within a few months, a new rink had opened in Reservoir where they were doing beer league, where you didn't have to be within the state structure and one of the, official club. You could just put in any team. So people were doing social teams, and we were like, well, we're just a social team that has another mission behind it rather than just playing hockey. So the timing worked out perfectly. And if it was if it was 5 years before, we probably wouldn't be doing much regularly because there was no outlet for it. So we went with the flow, and we kind of said, oh, okay, we've got a team. Oh, look, we've got a few more people interested. Okay, we've got 2 teams. And then I think we went to 4 and then 5, and then we're like 7. And every year I say we can't have more teams. I think even at 2, I said we can't have more. Definitely. And everyone's like, no, we definitely can. We can make it happen. I'm like, I guess if we have the people, yeah, like we can. It's great. But I just think, how are we going to do this? This is so many people to organize.
How I've spoken to a couple of people. The role of Ice HQ, they seem to have played a pretty big role in all of this with Southern Lights and things like that. Can you tell us about Ice HQ, because they actually hold Pride skate nights and things like that as well. They seem to be a very inclusive hockey rink.
Yeah, they've been great supporters of ours, and it helps that we have 7 teams. So when we say something, it's got some gravitas in that. We're not just one team of a bunch of dudes that are like, oh yeah, we'll turn up or whatever. We are organized, we're respectful with them, so we get that respect back. But also they share our values. We've never had any issues. Even stuff that we don't prompt, we're like, oh, did we suggest that? No, that was just them. The Pride nights, but all the rinks have been like quite good, and it's really, they've got the interest in growing skating and all of that, and they've really got the drive and the organization to do that. But we've really not had any issues with any of the rinks. They've all been really supportive of what we do. So we're thankful for that. This is, every so often I wondered, do we need to exist? Sometimes you think 10, 15 years ago, you'd be fighting to be allowed to play. You'd be maybe not publicly saying that we were a queer team. You just sort of get in just so we could create a quiet, safe space. But it's not been an issue. It's more on the personal level and the community level that we need to really subtly change things.
Have you found that playing at Ice HQ and other rinks and things like that, and being an out openly queer club, inclusive club, have you found that it really creates conversation with people that might not necessarily have had conversations with queer people in inclusive clubs and things like that?
Yeah, I think so. We hear it second, third hand, because obviously no one's going to talk about it with the organizers or the creators. But we have, like, in the early days, overheard a few, like, the classic, why do they need a club of their own? Like, and the old, oh, I identify as some random object. But like, the fact is, we don't, as a committee, we don't need to stand up and be like telling people off, because we have literally, like, at any time 100 players who are wearing our jerseys and like representing our values. So they do in many ways step up, and they're the ones talking about it in quieter conversations, one-on-one, making those people realize that that's not okay. And so I think that's really the power, is that, you know, we have many allies in our club as well, that they've come and they've, even though they might have been accepting, they're just a little bit more empowered. Maybe a lot of them for the first time will have met a they, them. And it's just, even though they were fine with pronouns, suddenly they're actually using them. It just pushes them to a little bit more acceptance and a little bit more confidence in calling someone out, or saying, well, no, actually, I do know trans people and it's fine. It is actually just exposure and mixing, which is what hockey's always done. At any sport, any good sport, you mix with a really different group of people than your social circle. And I think hockey does that particularly well because it's not localized. You don't play 5 minutes from home. Like, there is no local hockey. It's all of the state play in all 3 rinks.
Yeah, it'd be good if we had rinks all over the place and frozen ponds. It'd be pretty cool.
It'd be great for access. I actually think, though, I would miss that one thing about, like, you know, if you're in the southeast side, you'd just be playing with people from the southeast, and you'd come over to, I'm in the southeast, you're in the west, and I'd come over and be like, geez, those people from the west are rough. Like, at the moment, though, it's everyone's mixed in together, and I think there is something to appreciate about that, while we probably could use another 20 rinks.
I do hope that one day we can get an ice rink down here in Geelong, so I'd have somewhere to chuck some skates on and have a go.
It'd be wonderful. And then when that's announced, I just start thinking through, like, oh, some of our good players are traveling from, like, you know, around that area. I'm like, oh damn, we're gonna lose them.
As founder or co-founder of the Lights, how proud are you of the Lights? So people who are into hockey here, they might only see the AIHL or the AWIHL and the national teams, and that's it. But at a grassroots level, which Southern Lights are at the grassroots level, how proud are you that the Lights are now really embedded in that, like, grassroots level, in that local level?
Yeah, I think it's what we always knew we needed to do, and where we were always focusing, like the Southern Lights particularly, whereas the national body is a bit more advocacy. But I'm not actually that prideful in these things. I'm like, it was a thing that needed to be done, and we did it. I'm really appreciative of how much everyone's stepped up. We do often, we've gotten feedback. Just the new season started. We've had one round, and we went and said hi to all the teams, and we've got players who have come across from other teams, and they said, by far, this is the most smoothest, best organized club we've ever been part of. And it's wonderful to hear. We do that to make our life easier as well as the players. But I did think, like, actually, everyone involved has organized hockey in a non-queer sense, and thinking through it, behind every well-run community system, there's always queer people. It's the queer people who step up and do the work in, like, a very significant way, disproportionate to, you know, the numbers. And so I think that's actually, it's not surprising. You know, people are always willing to help because they understand how important community is, and they're willing to not just be part of it, but actually make the community.
And inside the Lights, you might not agree with this, but I believe you are the coach whisperer. What's it like?
Yes,
and what's it like? And why did you want to step into this sort of coaching area?
Well, so I've, like, from when I started playing, I kind of I've done all the roles. I was a linesman for a while, which I did enjoy, but it's not my forte, but did it for a while. And coached juniors, like kids down to, I think the youngest I did was the under maybe under nines, about that sort of age group, and as well as like under 16s, sort of before they got really serious. And actually, there's a couple of them that now play for Lights, just by luck. But I sort of done everything, and so when it came to the early days, I jumped up and like, yep, no, I can sort of coach. We're very explicit that we're not training you to play hockey. We're just keeping things running. If you want to learn hockey, you go to classes. There's other places. We will not make you good at hockey. We will just make the game run. And then as we grew, we needed more coaches. And then we did actually have enough coaches that I was like, great, I'm at the rink enough. I can do other things. And so now, because we've got so many teams, it's just there to support. And when a coach says, I can't be there, it's like, no fuss. Like, I'll jump in, I'll see who else, help people out, and often just reassure them, say, no, you're doing the right thing. That is fine. I think people see the coaches as having a very big role, whereas my sort of leadership style in this is that actually the coaches can affect very little except keep the attitude good. That's basically like their biggest role, and sometimes just say when there's chaos, be like, you go on and let me sort it out, or I know who's on next. But the attitude is, particularly in Southern Lights, so important. Like a team can turn really toxic without the right leadership, just not having the adrenaline from being a player, just someone sniping at another person, that resentment building up, bringing it to next week. That's the sort of thing that will eat away at clubs and relationships. And so our coaches are there to be like, you tell the coach, like, can you tell him to stop, tell him to stop taking long shifts. And the coach says, yeah, I'll definitely do that. And whether they do or not, it's mediated. You take some of the heat out. So that's my general coaching philosophy. There's also a lot of skills and things, but we do remind people it's a beer league team. So, I always say it's Thursday night netball. That is what we're playing. It's Thursday night mixed netball. If you're busy, don't worry. You just don't come. That's fine. No one is upset. Maybe for a grand final, they'd be upset, but this is recreation first and foremost, and everything else is a distant second.
Have you won a game as coach?
Oh, God. I'm trying to think how many. Yes, like heaps.
Because I was talking to Cade, and Cade's yet to win one.
So I kind of think it's mostly luck in what you turn up to, but then Cade's got such a bad track record that I wonder if it is. He actually coached our game I played a few days ago because our regular coach was sick. So he jumped in and he made the joke that, his record might change, and we drew that game. So
just stick to the processes and the win will come, Cade.
Yeah. Look, turning up is most of it, and he does that. You
can. Coaching people, and I suppose this is more from a Southern Lights perspective and queer people and things like that, because that's sort of the whole idea of the podcast, is to get to sort of the crust of this. What have you seen coaching, and what changes have you seen within queer people? Because when I've spoken to either Cade or Maddie, you get the idea that a lot of people come out of their shell, because obviously sport is not, as much as people might not want to admit it, it's not really a safe space in a lot of occasions in sport. Coaching and at the Southern Lights, what have you seen from people, from queer people?
We definitely see people coming out of their shell. Like it's nearly so predictable that we don't notice it anymore. And we see very nervous, anxious people who, like, after season 2, it becomes their comfortable place. They know that they've got support of the team and all that stuff. It is so interesting. We have had, like, I've definitely not always done the right thing here either, but coaching queer people is a different layer on top of just coaching people, in that a lot of queer people have had sometimes bad experiences with sport, and also like kind of authority, like a coach is nearly one of the archetypes of like a homophobic authority figure. So we do have to be very careful about not pushing someone too hard, because you know, within our community there's a lot of mental health, a lot of trauma, and we just start sometimes rubbing up against that when you are, you know, maybe too aggressively with someone, telling them what to do, or you really, and it's all coaching, you've got to know the people, but we definitely have found that there are ways that we need to be a bit maybe more, softer isn't the word, but more sensitive to everyone's style. And we also recognize that actually, because queer people are pushed out of sport early, they don't necessarily have the experience of being coached in a sporting environment. And part of it is getting people used to being coached and what that relationship looks like. Whereas I feel like you get a lot of people who have grown up playing sport, they understand the role that they're playing as a player. They understand the do's and don'ts of, you know, how you interact, but we actually kind of have to be explicit about that. And so we do, you know, we do say stuff early on and often that, here, you know, if you have an issue, come talk to us after. We're always there to listen. We won't always get it right, but, you know, kind of just go with it at the time. It works better. So we have found better results there, where we actually prime people to understand what this relationship and experience is. But mostly that makes it sound like it's all dramatic. That's like the 3% of all of it. Most of it's easy, fun-loving sort of hockey playing.
I think it's important though, because when I was growing up, sport's been part of my life forever. It's what I did growing up as a kid, and I always tell people the story of when I was 16 and I was playing Aussie rules, and I was closeted bi guy then, and I had the comment of, someone said they used to go gay bashing, and that was a teammate of mine, and I was only 16 at the time, and it always stuck with me. And this person was an older gentleman. So to have coaches who see you and understand who you are and things like that, it has to be important, where they can coach in a certain way and you don't have to sort of hide who you are.
Yeah. And that's shocking, but not as shocking as it should be, really. Like, you know, our ages and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of, it's so much better now, but being reminded of that. And we have players who are a fair bit older. And it's like, you got to remember where they're coming from. You know, this was extremely dangerous to be out. So you can understand why even putting on a rainbow jersey, like, that's a very vulnerable place to be, to, you know, literally flag yourself as out, and then on the ice too, you know. So it's something that we kind of always think about, but always keep getting new levels of, oh wow, that person I didn't realize, and, you know, learning more about our players.
What's the proudest moment that you've had being part of Southern Lights / LGBTQ ice hockey?
I think, God, I don't think I've got any particular moment. I think it's all been a pretty like smooth flow, and just a lot of little moments where I think a lot of times where people who you wouldn't expect, you'd expect to maybe be a bit outside of our community and have, you know, have a little bit of a attitude, have come through extremely inclusive. And you sort of think like, oh, this is because we're visible and exist. Like they've actually learned something and just made it part of their life now, that, oh yeah, pronouns, no problem. And oh yeah, some people are trans, no problem. And the fact that there's no distinct, like there's no big moments, it just has become so normal. think that no, I'm hard to answer that one.
I do say to people, it can be coming on this podcast.
I say we have, so I think if someone else was looking, they'd be like, what about this and this and this? I'm like, oh yeah, they are absolutely good. But I'm sort of maybe one when it's all put to the side, when I'm like 80, it will become apparent. But I'm in the middle of it. We're kind of going strength to strength, so we haven't reached the peak yet.
Do you think now, with Southern Lights and you've got Harbour Lights in New South Wales and the LGBTQI hockey, do you think we'll ever get to a stage where there will be out like AI players or things like that?
Yeah, I do. I think the strongest part of that is demographics, like just younger generations. That'll be a huge part of it, but also getting in the work of Eric Denman doing homophobia in hockey and other sports just showed how prevalent homophobic language is and how that does send people out of the sport, who could be top Australian players, but they leave before they've, when they're 12 or 15 or something. So I think we will slowly reduce that. And I think other sports are leading the way. It's going to become more commonplace. And I think it just, as a society, people will be out. People are coming out a lot earlier, a lot more visibly, that it would be very hard to be in the closet. The only way that we wouldn't have players is that they leave the sport. And look, that still happens. A lot of our players, it's a classic story. I played here, overseas, in Canada, in America. I played until like teenage years, sort of when they started understanding things about themselves. And then they stopped. They stopped because they're like, oh, I can't be LGBT in this environment. And now they've come back and they're like, no one's in their 20s when they come back. Now they're coming back in their 30s and 40s and 50s and saying like, oh, this is for me. I did love it. So we do cross our fingers. We're ready to support anything that, if we hear a whisper that something might have happened, we're there to sort of say, hey, if you want to chat, we're here. We exist to exactly for you. But I don't know if I'd put money on how soon. Could be surprised, could be next year, but it's a small community in Australia at that level. Could be 20 years.
I always think that there's queer people in the stands, there's queer people in administration, there's queer people talking on a podcast right now. There has to be queer people on the ice.
Yeah. And like when you think like even just putting letters to people saying that's virtually dying out. Like, kids now are they're like, oh, I'm just sort of not straight. And I feel like that might overtake it sooner, that there will be people who are somewhere on the Kinsey scale already, and it will just be a non-event before it becomes like someone is out. Speculation. I think it's all moving in the right direction. Like I'm not worried about the direction it's going, but it will be very interesting to find out when it happens and how. And look, it should be said, we're talking about cis men here. There are plenty of out AWIHL players. That's that horse bolted many years ago. So they're really leading the way in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it seems to be a case across all sports as well. Thanks for coming on today, Brendan. Is there anything that you want to plug before you go?
Say Southern Lights. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're aware of us. They come down. We do have events. Follow us on socials is the best way. We pump everything through there. So you say, oh, that's happening next week. Do that. And maybe just like one of the reasons that we started, or one of the reasons that I know Southern Lights was a good idea is about when we started it, I actually found out that someone I played with on a team for like 7 or 8 years, nice guy. I found out that he actually had a male partner that entire time, and I never knew. We never realized that we were both queer. And I just think like, what a stupid waste of time. Why were we like, he was just a quiet guy. I'm like, well, yeah, because he was closeted, even though he was out in the rest of his life, not at hockey. I think, yeah, that's so stupid. It wasn't hiding, it was just not being out. And I think that's something that should never happen. That shouldn't be anyone's experience, even for, a season. It should be like, you've got your Southern Lights stickers on your helmet and say, oh, you play for them. It's like, yes, because I'm bisexual. And like, cool, yeah, my pronouns are this. And everyone's like, oh yeah, mine are this. That's really what we're there for. And I'm hoping that we can just keep this speed going.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thanks for coming on today, Brendan. I enjoyed the chat. Hopefully we can continue this with more Southern Lights people, and hopefully this podcast can just get a bit of awareness out there for different people and clubs that hockey fans might not know. So thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for all the work you're doing.